Good evening. It really was the biggest crowd ever assembled for a single performance in one place in the entire history of the world. It was tonight, and it was in Tampa. The name of the group, Led Zeppelin. They've been around for years, popular with the acid rock crowd, big on album sales. Tonight they broke the world record set by the Beatles, and Channel 13's John Jones watched it happen.
In the late 1960s, the musical landscape of North America was changing. The countercultural revolution was well underway, and rock and roll had evolved into the defining soundtrack of rebellion. Bands like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and The Who had already blazed trails across the continent, but a new force was emerging from Britain, ready to redefine the very sound of rock. That force was Led Zeppelin.
Their names are Robert Plant, John Benham, Jimmy Page, and John Paul Jones.
Do you think as musicians you'll be able to last as long as 8 years? Do you think you'll be inventive enough?
No, but I think it's changing. That's the main thing, you see. I think that's why the awards have changed, because the kids are changing for a start. And so is the music changing.
Between 1968 and 1977, the band embarked on 8 North American tours, transforming from relative unknowns playing club gigs to the biggest rock act in the world, dominating stadiums and shattering attendance records. This is the story of those legendary tours, the triumphs, the chaos, and the legacy they left behind.
At the same time, Jimmy Page is one of the best guitar players I've ever known, and Bonham was a hell of a powerhouse drummer. Plant was exuberant, Robert's exuberant enough to be an LV.
In the summer of 1968, after the dissolution of the Yardbirds, guitarist Jimmy Page began forming a new band that would initially be known as the New Yardbirds. By October, the name Led Zeppelin was born, a cheeky reference to a joke by The Who's drummer Keith Moon, who had once quipped that the project would go down like a lead balloon. With Page recruiting young vocalist Robert Plant, bassist and keyboardist John Paul Jones, and powerhouse drummer John Bonham, the group's chemistry was immediate. Within weeks, they recorded their debut album, Led Zeppelin 1, an explosive blend of blues, hard rock, and psychedelia. But they needed to prove themselves live, and where better to do that than America? On December the 26th, 1968, Led Zeppelin played their first North American show at the Denver Auditorium Arena, opening for Vanilla Fudge. The band walked on stage to little fanfare. Few in the audience knew who they were. But by the end of their set, jaws had dropped. Their opening song, Train Kept A-Rolling, a high-energy rock staple originally popularized by the Yardbirds, set the tone for what was to come.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Led Zeppelin!
Plant's raw, wailing vocals cut through the venue like a force of nature, while Page's guitar solos electrified the crowd. Bonham's drumming was relentless, and Jones's bass lines were the glue that held the chaos together.
At the Denver show, they debuted things that would become their trademarks in concert. Jimmy Page taking a bow to his guitar strings.
What made Zeppelin unique wasn't just their musicianship, it was their ability to take familiar blues structures and transform them into something primal and new. A fan who attended the Denver show described it as a sonic explosion. He recalled, "Nobody knew who they were when they started, but by the time they finished, everyone was asking, who the hell are these guys?" Their setlist during this tour consisted of a mix of blues covers and original songs from their debut album, including Communication Breakdown, Dazed and Confused, and You Shook Me. Dazed and Confused, in particular, became a live centerpiece, often stretched beyond 15 minutes as Page experimented with his now famous violin bow technique. The eerie, otherworldly sounds he created captivated audiences. It wasn't just a performance, it was an experience. As the tour progressed, word of mouth spread quickly. By the time they reached San Francisco to play the legendary Fillmore West, the buzz around Led Zeppelin had grown. Bill Graham, the influential concert promoter who managed the Fillmore venues, initially booked them as a supporting act. But after seeing their performance, he promoted them to headliners for subsequent nights. They had something special, Graham later said. They weren't just loud, they were captivating. During the Fillmore shows, the band's improvisational skills were on full display. No two performances were exactly the same. Plant's vocal ad-libs, Bonham's thunderous fills, and Page's extended solos gave their sets a sense of unpredictability. Fans never knew when a song would veer off into a spontaneous jam session. But despite the growing fan base, not everyone was convinced. Critics were divided. Some praised the band's energy and musicianship, while others dismissed them as another overhyped British blues act. One review from the San Francisco Chronicle described their sound as a noisy, over-the-top assault on the senses. But Zeppelin wasn't concerned with winning over critics. They were focused on winning over audiences. And that they did. Their first tour concluded in February 1969, having covered over 30 dates. In January, their debut album had been released in the US, and although it received mixed reviews, it began to climb the charts, propelled by their live reputation. Songs like Good Times, Bad Times and Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You became radio staples, further solidifying their presence in the American music scene. The band returned to the US just 2 months later for their second tour, now headlining many of their shows. One of the most iconic performances of this tour took place at the Boston Tea Party in May 1969. The venue was small and intimate, but the energy inside was explosive. Originally scheduled for a standard 2-hour set, Zeppelin ended up playing for nearly 4 hours after the audience refused to let them leave. Jimmy Page later recalled, "We played everything we knew. The crowd wouldn't let us off the stage, so we just kept going. It was one of those nights where you realize you've connected with people on a deeper level."
Say 1 week, we'll probably have 5 shows in it. And each of those shows would be minimum of 3 hours long. That's some serious workout, both musically and physically.
During this period, their set lists began to evolve. While they continued to play tracks from their debut album, they also started incorporating new material from their upcoming second album. Songs like Whole Lotta Love and The Lemon Song hinted at the heavier, riff-driven direction they were moving toward. Their third North American tour, launched in mid-1969, saw them playing larger venues and festivals. The Seattle Pop Festival in July was a standout performance. Despite the rain, the band played a high-energy set that included a now legendary 15-minute version of How Many More Times. Plant's voice, already powerful on record, was even more commanding in a live setting. Bonham's drumming during this show earned him particular praise, with one reviewer describing it as an unstoppable force. By the end of 1969, Led Zeppelin had completed 3 North American tours, released 2 successful albums, and built a reputation as one of the most dynamic live acts in the world. But they were far from finished. By 1970, Led Zeppelin had become a force to be reckoned with. Their first 2 albums were major successes in North America, and their live performances were quickly becoming the stuff of legend. But the band had no intention of resting on their laurels. They wanted to push boundaries, to play bigger venues, create bolder music, and establish themselves as the premier live act of their generation. Their fourth North American tour, which kicked off in the spring of 1970, would be a critical step in that journey. The tour opened in Vancouver, where they performed at the Pacific Coliseum to a crowd of over 10,000. It was clear from the outset that this tour was different. The band's confidence had grown, and their stage presence was magnetic. Plant had fully embraced his role as a rock god, strutting across the stage with an ease that belied his youth. Page, dressed in his signature embroidered jackets, attacked his guitar with a precision and fury that left audiences in awe. Bonham and Jones, often overlooked by the media at the time, were the backbone of the band, creating a rhythm section so tight that even their longest improvisations never felt aimless.
Once you walk on stage and the music starts, you tend to forget about everything else. And then immediately it's the eye contact and listening for cues and listening and you know, a lot of concentration on stage in a Zeppelin concert. You know, you've got to be ready and, you know, you can't drift off thinking about things. It's and that was there right from the first shows right to the end. You know, you can see it in Nebworth. Everybody was still like Bonzo and I still watching each other and making sure everything's right and right place, and there's constant adjusting and, you know, musically. I mean, you know, and that was always there.
The highlight of the Vancouver show was a 25-minute rendition of Dazed and Confused. What had once been a 5-minute blues rock track had transformed into a sprawling epic, complete with Page's violin bow solo, eerie feedback loops, and thundering drum fills. Plant's vocals soared over the cacophony, switching seamlessly between haunting whispers and ferocious screams. From Vancouver, the band moved south, hitting major cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Dallas. The West Coast dates were particularly important, as California had become a cultural epicenter for rock and roll. The band's performance at the LA Forum was one of the most memorable of the tour. They played a nearly 3-hour set that included early versions of Since I've Been Loving You, a blues ballad that would later be featured on their third album. Critics were beginning to take notice of the band's growth. A review in the Los Angeles Times described their LA Forum show as a masterclass in controlled chaos. The review praised Page's guitar work, calling it both savage and delicate, and highlighted Bonham's drumming as the heartbeat of the entire night. But it wasn't just the performances that were making headlines. Led Zeppelin was quickly gaining a reputation for their offstage antics. Their after-parties were legendary. Hotel suites were transformed into makeshift nightclubs, complete with endless booze, groupies, and even occasional visits from other rock stars.
Did you have to put up a $10,000 deposit to get into one hotel here in New York?
Well, that wasn't really my fault.
No.
One infamous incident during this tour involved Bonham riding a motorcycle down the hallway of a hotel, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. Despite the chaos, the band remained focused on their music. Their third album, Led Zeppelin III, was released in October 1970, just as their North American tour was winding down. The album was a departure from their previous work, incorporating more acoustic elements and showcasing the band's versatility.
I don't know how I'm gonna tell you. I can't play with you no more.
Songs like Tangerine and That's the Way revealed a softer, more introspective side of the band, but their live shows remained as loud and raucous as ever. The following year, in 1971, Led Zeppelin returned to North America for their fifth tour. This time, they were armed with material from their soon-to-be-released fourth album, which included what would become their most iconic song, Stairway to Heaven. When the band debuted Stairway live, audiences didn't know what to make of it. The song started with a delicate acoustic intro, with Page strumming a 12-string guitar and Jones playing a soft flute melody on the mellotron. But as the song progressed, it built into a powerful crescendo, with Plant delivering one of the most memorable vocal performances of his career. By the time Page's final solo hit, the audience was in a frenzy.
A stairway to heaven.
A fan who attended the band's performance at the Orlando Sports Stadium recalled, "We didn't know what we were hearing at first. It wasn't like their other songs. It was slower, more atmospheric. But when they hit that final section, it was like the roof was going to blow off the place." The 1971 tour also featured expanded versions of older material. Whole Lotta Love was a nightly highlight, often stretching beyond 20 minutes, as the band incorporated snippets of blues classics like Boogie Chillin' and Let That Boy Boogie. Bonham's drum solo during Moby Dick also grew in length, with some performances exceeding 30 minutes. Fans described it as mesmerizing. Bonham would start with a basic groove and gradually build it into a thunderous polyrhythmic display of raw power. But as the tour went on, the band's growing fame came with its share of challenges. Security at their shows became a major issue, as thousands of fans would rush the stage or try to sneak backstage. At one concert in Pittsburgh, over 200 fans were ejected for attempting to breach the security barriers. Plant later joked, "We had more people trying to get backstage than we had in the front row." The tour ended with a triumphant performance at Madison Square Garden in New York City, a venue that had become a symbol of success for any major rock act. The band delivered a blistering set that included the live debut of Black Dog, another track from their upcoming fourth album. The audience, unaware of how iconic this song would become, responded with thunderous applause. By the time the tour ended, Led Zeppelin had solidified their place at the top of the rock hierarchy. Led Zeppelin 4 would go on to become one of the best-selling albums of all time, and songs like Stairway to Heaven and Rock and Roll would become staples of their live shows for years to come. But with success came pressure. Their next tours would be even bigger, and the stakes would be higher. The band was heading into uncharted territory, the era of stadium rock. By 1972, Led Zeppelin had become a phenomenon. Their fourth album, commonly known as Led Zeppelin 4, had transformed them from rising stars to global icons. Stairway to Heaven was dominating the airwaves despite never being released as a single, and their live shows were quickly becoming the largest and most sought-after events in rock music.
You go to a lot of rock concerts?
Yeah, I do.
You like the big groups?
Right.
The monster groups?
Right.
Is Zeppelin a monster group?
Yeah, they are.
You go to a lot of rock concerts?
Yes, I do.
How much did you pay for your ticket to the Zeppelin concert?
$7.50.
Would you pay $7.50 for anybody?
No, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't.
How much did you pay for your Zeppelin ticket?
$50.
$8.50?
Yeah.
A lot of money.
Yeah, it's worth it, I think. It is.
How much did you pay for your ticket?
$8.50. Right.
Would you pay $8.50 for a new group?
Well, they're not worth it. They're not a proven group, and no one would pay $8.50. Not even for the Garden.
But you would for the Zeppelin?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, they're an established group.
The band's fifth North American tour, launched in June 1972, marked the beginning of their transition from large theaters to massive arenas and outdoor stadiums, a change that would reshape the future of live rock performances. They opened the tour in Detroit at Cobo Hall, where over 12,000 fans packed the venue. From the very first notes of Immigrant Song, the energy in the room was palpable. The song had become a concert staple, with its Viking imagery and galloping rhythm perfectly suited to an opening number. Plant's wailing cries echoed through the venue, met by a deafening roar from the crowd. Page's guitar riff sliced through the air, and Bonham's drums thundered like artillery fire. Detroit was just the start. The tour moved quickly through the Midwest and South, with each performance attracting larger and more frenzied audiences. One of the tour's defining moments came in Los Angeles, where they played 2 sold-out shows at the LA Forum. The Forum had already seen its share of legendary performances, from Jimi Hendrix to the Rolling Stones, but Zeppelin's shows were on another level. Over 18,000 fans packed the venue each night, and the band delivered sets that critics later described as earth-shaking. During their performance of Dazed and Confused, Page unleashed a 30-minute version of the song, filled with experimental solos, feedback loops, and his signature solo section. At one point he knelt on the floor, violin bow in hand, as the sound of his guitar reverberated through the arena like a ghostly wail. The audience was mesmerized, some standing in stunned silence while others screamed as if they were witnessing a ritual. Plant, drenched in sweat, paced the stage like a preacher delivering a sermon, his voice piercing through the cacophony with lines improvised on the spot. One fan who attended the LA Forum show described the experience as otherworldly. It wasn't just music, it was a spectacle. They made you feel like you were part of something bigger, like you were witnessing history being made. The 1972 tour also marked the live debut of several new songs from their upcoming fifth album, Houses of the Holy. Tracks like Over the Hills and Far Away and The Song Remains the Same showcase the band's evolving sound, blending acoustic elements with their signature hard rock intensity. Over the Hills and Far Away quickly became a fan favorite, with its delicate acoustic intro giving way to a powerful riff-driven climax. But behind the scenes, the band's rock and roll lifestyle was beginning to catch up with them. Their notoriety for wild parties and hotel destruction had become part of their mythos.
It was an extremely volatile, intense, traveling rock and roll circus.
In Chicago, they allegedly rented an entire floor of a luxury hotel and threw a party that lasted 2 days. Bonham, known for his love of pranks, reportedly became more restless as the tour progressed. Plant later joked, "If we weren't playing shows, we were destroying hotel rooms." By the time the 1972 tour ended, Led Zeppelin had established themselves as the biggest live act in the world, but they weren't done yet. The following year, they returned to North America for their 1973 tour, which would become one of the most significant in rock history. When they kicked off the 1973 tour in Atlanta, they were greeted by over 40,000 fans at the Atlanta Stadium, a record-breaking crowd for the venue.
Last night in Atlanta, that crowd was the biggest gathering ever in the history of Georgia, 49,000. And tonight in Tampa, the record set for the world.
This tour marked their full transition to stadium rock, with massive outdoor shows that set new attendance records across the country. At the Tampa Stadium in Florida, they played to a crowd of 56,800, surpassing the record previously held by the Beatles. The atmosphere was electric, with fans screaming the lyrics to Rock and Roll and Black Dog as the band launched into their set. The stage production on this tour was larger than ever before, featuring an upgraded sound system designed to fill stadiums with crystal-clear audio. But even with the expanded production, Zeppelin remained committed to their roots as a band that thrived on raw energy and improvisation. Their performance at Madison Square Garden in New York City, captured for the concert film The Song Remains the Same, demonstrated their ability to balance spectacle with musical authenticity. During the Garden shows, Stairway to Heaven took on a life of its own. Page's solo at the song's climax had grown longer and more intricate, with fans hanging on every note. Plant's vocals were at their peak, his voice carrying a mixture of power and vulnerability that made the song's lyrics resonate deeply with audiences. For many fans, seeing Zeppelin perform Stairway live was a spiritual experience. The 1973 tour wasn't without its controversies. In San Francisco, a group of fans broke through security barriers and stormed the stage during the band's encore. Bonham, known for his short temper, reportedly threw his drumsticks at one of the intruders before security intervened. Plant later recalled the incident with amusement. John wasn't going to let anyone ruin his moment. Offstage, the band's excesses continued. They traveled between cities on their private jet, nicknamed the Starship, which was equipped with luxurious seating, a bar, and even a bedroom. Page, who had developed a fascination with the occult, often retreated to his private quarters on the plane, reading books by Aleister Crowley and writing new material. Bonham and Plant, on the other hand, were often at the center of the party, drinking heavily and swapping tour stories.
And it gets to the point where people will go, oh, that was really excessive that they had a plane. Well, it wasn't. It wasn't, because it meant that you could stay in New York, unpack your suitcase, and you could be based in New York while you flew into Philadelphia and you flew to Washington and you Do you see? It starts to sort of add up then, that it makes sort of sense. But you're doing multiple shows, and it all has to be seen in context. But it was quite a workout, but it was good. You know, it was a good way to practice as well.
But the relentless pace of touring was beginning to take a toll. Bonham's drinking had become a concern for the band, and Page's increasing drug use was starting to affect his performances. Still, the 1973 tour ended on a high note, with Zeppelin firmly established as the biggest band on the planet. Their live album, The Song Remains the Same, and its accompanying film captured the essence of their live performances, giving fans a glimpse into the power of a Zeppelin show.
Good evening.
In 1975, they returned for another North American tour, this time in support of their double album, Physical Graffiti. The album was a commercial and critical success, featuring iconic tracks like Kashmir, Trampled Underfoot, and In My Time of Dying. Their 5-night residency at Madison Square Garden was a highlight of the tour, with each show attracting over 20,000 fans. Kashmir quickly became a centerpiece of their live sets, with its hypnotic riff and Middle Eastern-inspired melodies creating an almost trance-like atmosphere. Page described the song as one of the band's most important compositions, and it was clear that the audience agreed.
It just so happened that there was this song that I had called Swan Song, believe it or not, and it was all these parts and intricate guitar parts, and right at the very end of it, I had this thing which went like this. And then the tape ends.
As the song's final notes rang out, the crowd erupted in applause, demanding encores that often stretched the shows well past their scheduled end times. But despite the tour's success, the cracks in the band's foundation were becoming more apparent. Bonham's drinking was getting worse, and Plant was struggling to balance the demands of touring with his responsibilities as a husband and father. The band's wild lifestyle, once a source of inspiration, was beginning to take its toll.
We were doing a show at the Rose Palace out in Pasadena, and it was Bonzo's birthday.
John Bonham,
and we were doing 2 shows. And Barry Imhoff, who was with Bill Graham, the promoter, put on a little entertainment for us. You know, and he took us back to a hotel, and he had all this. The hotel was decorated with all fruits and vegetables, and in the bathtub we had a few octopuses, and out came these lovely girls. And they took a bath with the octopus. They were quite happy in there.
By the time the 1975 tour ended, Led Zeppelin had reached the peak of their powers. But the pressures of fame, personal struggles, and substance abuse were threatening to unravel everything they had built. Their next North American tour in 1977 would be their most ambitious yet, but it would also be their last. By 1977, Led Zeppelin was at the pinnacle of their success. They were no longer just a rock band, they were an institution. Their previous tour in 1975 had shattered records, and their double album Physical Graffiti had further solidified their dominance in the rock world. But beneath the surface, the band was beginning to crack. Personal tragedies, substance abuse, and the pressures of fame were all converging. Their 1977 North American tour would be their most ambitious and extravagant yet, but it would also signal the end of an era. The tour began in April at the Dallas Memorial Auditorium, with over 10,000 fans packed into the venue. From the moment the band walked on stage, the crowd's energy was electric. They opened with The Song Remains the Same, with Page's blistering guitar riff immediately igniting the audience. Plant's vocals, though still powerful, carried a different weight compared to previous tours. He had taken a long time to recover from a serious car crash in 1975 while on a family holiday in Greece. He had spent several months in a wheelchair while recuperating, but Plant channeled that emotion into his performances, giving them a depth and feeling that was palpable. The tour quickly escalated into larger venues and stadiums. In late April, The band played at the Pontiac Silverdome in Michigan, where they performed in front of 76,000 fans, setting a new record for the largest indoor concert at the time. The sheer scale of the event was staggering, with fans filling every inch of the stadium, creating a deafening wall of sound that seemed to lift the band to new heights. Their set lists featured a mix of classics and newer material, including Achilles' Last Stand from their 1976 album Presence. The song, with its galloping rhythm and intricate guitar work, was a showcase for Page's technical prowess and Bonham's driving drum patterns. But while the performances on stage remained powerful, the band's off-stage behavior had become increasingly chaotic. Page's heroin addiction had worsened, affecting his ability to rehearse and sometimes leading to erratic performances. Bonham's drinking was spiraling out of control, and his violent outbursts were becoming more frequent.
I've witnessed Bonzo just cut loose. He had definitely split personality. He would when he was drinking, when he wasn't drinking.
On more than one occasion, Bonham had to be physically restrained by members of the crew after getting into fights backstage. One of the tour's most infamous incidents occurred at the Oakland Coliseum in July. The band was scheduled to perform 2 back-to-back shows at the stadium, but tensions between Zeppelin's security team and the venue's staff reached a boiling point. During the second night, a violent altercation broke out backstage, reportedly involving members of Zeppelin's entourage assaulting a security guard. The incident resulted in multiple arrests, including that of John Bonham and the band's manager, Peter Grant. The Oakland incident made headlines across the country, adding to the band's reputation for excess and chaos.
And they had an altercation in San Francisco involving Bill Graham, which was unfortunate.
Despite the turmoil, the band's performances continued to draw massive crowds. Their rendition of Kashmir became a nightly highlight, with its hypnotic, droning riff filling stadiums and creating a sense of grandeur. Plant, standing at the edge of the stage, would close his eyes during the song's climactic moments, as if channeling something otherworldly. Kashmir was our anchor during that tour, Plant later said. No matter what was happening offstage, that song brought us back to the core of what we were about.
It almost was like the antithesis of the music was this kind of lyric and this vocal delivery that was just about enough.
However, the emotional and physical toll of the tour was becoming too much. In July, while in New Orleans, Plant received devastating news. His son Karak had died. The grief was overwhelming. The band immediately cancelled the remainder of the tour, and Plant returned to the UK to be with his family. The cancellation marked the abrupt end of what was supposed to be Zeppelin's grand victory lap across North America. For the band, the tragedy signalled the beginning of the end. Although they would regroup in the following years, Led Zeppelin would never embark on another North American tour. Their next major project was the 1979 release of In Through the Outdoor, but the magic of their earlier tours had faded. In 1980, John Bonham's death from alcohol poisoning would bring the band to an official end. Without Bonham, Led Zeppelin could not continue. Between 1968 and 1977, Led Zeppelin's North American tours reshaped the concert experience. They elevated the idea of a live performance from a mere musical set to a full-blown spectacle. They weren't just playing songs, they were creating immersive experiences. Zeppelin pioneered the concept of arena rock, proving that a band could connect with tens of thousands of fans in massive venues without losing its raw power. Their influence extends far beyond the music itself. Bands like Guns N' Roses, Metallica, and even modern-day rock giants like the Foo Fighters have cited Zeppelin's live performances as a blueprint for how to command a stage. From the extended solos to the improvisational jams, Zeppelin taught the world that rock was more than just a genre. It was an event. Their North American tours were filled with moments of triumph, chaos, and tragedy. They broke records, tore through hotel rooms, and created music that would endure for generations. Even today, fans speak of Zeppelin's live shows with reverence, as if recalling a religious experience. And in many ways, that's exactly what they were. Led Zeppelin didn't just perform, they transformed. Although the band officially disbanded after Bonham's death, their spirit lives on. Through concert films, bootleg recordings, and fan memories, The echoes of those legendary North American tours continue to inspire musicians and fans alike. The thunder of Bonham's drums, the wail of Plant's voice, the soaring solos of Page's guitar. They may have faded from the stage, but they'll never be forgotten. As Plant once said, Led Zeppelin was lightning in a bottle. You can't capture that again, but you can always feel its shock.
New York, good night.